Hi lovelies, this is Sess Fashion. Welcome back to another interesting tutorial. In today's class, we're going to cut and sew this beautiful dress with layered circular hem. If you're interested in knowing how to make this, please keep watching because it is a very detailed tutorial and it is easy to make. Don't forget to subscribe, do well to like my video, and you can turn on notification because I upload videos here every week. Without wasting much time, let's get straight into it. I'll be using this beautiful Ankara print right here. This is actually a full Ankara of 6 yards, but I ended up using about 5 yards to achieve this design. Once you have your fabric ready, we can proceed to draft. So guys, I'm going over to draft the upper part of my dress, and here I'll be drafting the front piece. I went ahead to fold my fabric into two like this, and to know how wide you'll be folding this, you're going to divide your bust measurement, which is the widest upper bust, into 4, and you're going to add about 5 inches allowance, and then you're going to fold according to that. I'm going to cut this alongside with lining, so that, because we know we're going to be turning this with a lining. So proceeding with our drafting, I'll first of all draw a straight line here, which will serve as a shoulder line. After that, I'll be marking down my vertical measurements, which is the shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, and the half length. I'll also be adding my joining allowance and shoulder allowance at this waist point. So if you've been following my tutorial, you should know that I always add my joining allowance for the shoulder at this end part here. So altogether I added 1.5 inches there. So this line right here, this is our bust point line. Here, this is our under bust, our half length, and our allowance. The next thing, I'm going to insert my shoulder measurement divided by 2. And I'll be adding half inch for joining to the sleeve. At this point, I'll drop it by 1 inch. And to create the neckline, I'll be going up by 4 inches. And for the depth, I'll also make it 4 inches. And then I'll make a shoulder slant to meet this point here. For the armhole, I'm going to be marking my bust measurement divided by 6 plus 1.5. I'm placing my tape from this slant line here. After doing that, I'll measure what I have here and mark the middle. From this middle, I'll go in by half inch. And then I'll be creating my armhole curve. Now that we're done drafting this, the next thing I'm going to do, I'll be inserting my bust pan, which is also called a nipple to nipple point here. And the formula together is your bust measurement divided by 8 minus 1. So because I'm drafting directly on my fabric, I'll be adding half inch to whatever I have. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to take the measurement of what we have on this armhole curve, like so, because you know, for a princess that we're going to take in that from the armhole and also from the waistline. So right here, this is me measuring what I have, and here I have 9 inches. I'll be dividing that 9 inch into 2. So from this slant point here, I'm going to place my tape and measure 9 divided by 2, making it 4.5, and I'll mark that here. And then I'm going to draw a slant line from this armhole curve to meet the bust point line, like this. To know the amount of that you'll be taking, it's going to be determined by how busty your client is. For me, my client is not so busty, so I'm making use of ½ inch on both sides. But if your client is busty, you can make use of 3/4 inch or even 1 inch. So I'm going ahead to mark ½ inch on both sides here, just on both sides of the line, and I'll be connecting this point to meet this bust point line. But before I do that, I'll be coming up by 1 inch, and then I'm going to take this point to meet up. Okay, so now I've created the dart on the armhole. The next thing, I'll be creating the dart on the waistline, and I'll also take ½ inch on both sides. So sometimes you find that a client is slim but she's busty, so in that case you can take 3/4 inch on both sides, so that it can, because the more that you take, the more room there is around the bust. So you can do 3/4 inch on both sides or even 1 inch, that's fine. But for me, this is what I'm working with, ½ inch on both sides. So I've gone ahead to mark ½ inch here, and I'll be joining this point to the bust point line, and also here I'll come down by 1 inch, just like what I did here, before going ahead to connect them like this. So basically I'm done with my princess dart. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to be inserting our horizontal measurements. So the first thing is to divide your bust into 4, and I'll be marking that on this chest line here. And you know that we have taken out 1 inch here for the dart, so whatever we've taken here, we're going to be replacing it on this bust point line. So ½ inch here and half inch here, making it 1 inch in total. That is what I'm adding here. After doing that, you know that we're going to be joining these 2 points together. We're going to cut out and join back together, and after joining, we're going to have ½ inch taken out from here and also ½ inch taken out from here. So I'm also going to be adding that to this point. That is another 1 inch gone. And after that, I'll be adding my sewing allowance. So it depends on how much you use to sew. For me, I'm making use of 2 inches. I like to add enough allowance so that I'm always on the safer side. So altogether here, I've added 4 inches to my actual bust measurement. Coming to the waistline, I'll be dividing my waist measurement into 4, and I'll mark that here. I'll also add what I've taken out for the dart, and that is 1 inch. And you know we're going to be joining these 2 points together, so 1 inch must have gone after joining, so we'll add that back here, and my 2 inch sewing allowance. Altogether I've added 4 inches here as well. Then I'll be connecting these 2 points together with a straight line. Before we go ahead to cut out, we are going to be extending this line here, because after we sew, we're going to have some shortening at this side of princess dart. So right here, I'm going to be extending it to whatever I have taken out here. So right here, I have 1 inch. That is what I'll be marking out here. Just place your tape like this and mark 1 inch, and then I'll be extending this line to meet that 1 inch point. After which, I'll go ahead to create my new armhole curve. And now we have our front princess dart drafted out. We're going to be cutting it at this point. Before I cut through, I'll make sure that I don't have any pointy points here. So I'm going to be smoothing this out like this. And now I can cut through.
So guys, this is what it looks like after cutting out. I'll go ahead to draft the back piece. Now I'm going over to draft the back piece. I'll also draw a line here which will serve as the shoulder line. And then at this point here, I'll be marking down my zipper allowance, which is 2 inches. The next thing, I'll be inserting my shoulder measurement divided by 2, and I'll be inserting that from the zipper allowance. And I'll be adding ½ inch to whatever I have as my shoulder measurement to join the sleeve. At this point, I'll go down by 1 inch for shoulder slant. Next thing, I'll be inserting my neck width, which should be the same with the front. And from this zipper allowance, I'll mark that here, which is 4 inch. And for the neck depth, I'm making use of 2 inches. And I'll be creating my curve like so. I'll extend that line all through to the zipper allowance. Here I'll be making my shoulder slant. Next thing, from this shoulder slant here, I'll be marking down my chest line. And I'll draw a straight line across it. So basically, the 2 vertical measurements we need here is the chest line and the half length. So right here, this is my chest line from the shoulder to chest. Next thing, I'll mark my half length from the shoulder. My half length is 16 plus sewing allowance of 1.5, joining allowance of 1.5, making it 17.5. Now to create the dart, I'll be marking in my bust span just after the zipper allowance. So for the back dart, it usually stops 1 inch below the chest line. So I'm just coming here to mark 1 inch here. And on this waistline, I'll be marking ½ inch on both sides. And then I'll create my dart to meet this 1 inch we have dropped from the chest. So I'm not going to be cutting through this. I'm just going to sew it while joining all my pieces. So the next thing, I'll be creating my armhole, and to do that, I'll first of all draw a straight line from this slant, from this shoulder slant to meet the chest line like this. And I'll be creating the armhole curve here. Okay, and then I'll be inserting my horizontal measurement, which is my bust divided by 4. All my markings are after the zipper allowance. 9.25 plus 2 inch sewing allowance, making it here. And on this waistline, I'll be marking my waist measurement divided by 4 plus 2 inch sewing allowance. I'll also be adding the 1 inch which I'll be taking away for the darts. After which, I'll connect all my lines together. So listen carefully to what I'm about to show you. I'm going to be altering this back piece because we want to get rid of any bulge around the zipper area, and you know our back is usually shorter than the front. So to achieve that, I'll come here on this zipper point. I'm going to be marking up 3/4 inch, and also on the side of our piece, I'll be marking 3/4 inch upwards from the waist, and I'll be connecting these lines together with a slight curve like this. Okay, so now we have our back piece drafted out. I'll be cutting it out. Also, I'll be opening up this zipper part. And this is what our back piece looks like. I'm going to bring over my front piece and I'll be ushering the side as well so that it sits nicely around the waist. So bringing over my front piece at this side here, I'll be marking up 3/4 of an inch. Since we have marked 3/4 of an inch also on the back, it has to align, else you have your measurements one longer than the other. So after marking 3/4 of an inch from the waist upwards, I'll be connecting it to this point here down to the waistline with a slight curve like this, and I'll cut it out. Going over to mark the down part of my dress, I'll first of all draw a straight line here which will serve as our waistline, and then I'll be marking my allowance, the allowance I'll use to join this skirt part to the top. So I've marked down 1 inch here. So all my measurements are going to start from this second line here. So I'll first of all mark my vertical measurement, which is my waist to hip line, 8 inches, and also my skirt length. I'm making use of 17 inches. So I'll be adding 1/2 inch to that, making it 17.5. After that, we're marking my horizontal measurement, which is my round waist divided by 4, and I'll mark that on the waistline here. I'll also be adding my sewing allowance, which is 2 inches. And don't forget that I'll be adding a dart to this point, so I'll be adding 1 inch for that. The next thing, on this hip line here, I'll be marking my hip measurement divided by 4. And I'll be adding 2 inches for sewing allowance. Okay, so whatever you have marked on this hip line here I have 11.5. I'll be subtracting 2 inches from that to mark on this hemline. So 11.5 minus 2 gives 9.5. I'll be marking that here, and then I'll connect all my dots together. Going over to the back of my skirt piece, I'll first of all mark my zipper allowance, which is 2 inches. And then I'll also draw a straight line here, which will serve as our waistline. After doing that, I'm going to bring over my front piece, which we just cut out, and I'll be placing it along this line after the zipper allowance here, aligning every point, waist line, and like this. So basically I'm cutting everything exactly the same, only leaving out this allowance we've kept for the zipper. So this is what we have, our front piece and also our back piece. So for the back, I'll be opening it up for the zipper allowance. I'll also do the same thing for the lining piece. So guys, to join my pieces together, I went ahead and I ironed my feasible interfacing on the main fabric, ironed it on the back side. So guys, to join these pieces together, I'm going to turn this to the right side, and I'll be placing this other piece like this, right sides facing each other, and I'll be aligning it. I'm going to start sewing from the waist. Always start sewing your princess dart from the waist. So I'm going to sew this with 1/2 inch all through, and when I get to this point, I'm just going to turn it over like this and sew until it fits up to this part. I'll be doing the same thing for both sides, and I'll also repeat the same thing for the lining. So after joining, this is what my princess dart looks like. I also went ahead to do the same thing for the lining piece. So what I'm going to do next, I'll be turning it over to the back side, and I'm going to be notching this cuff part so that by the time I press it with my iron, it lays down nicely along here. Basically, notching is just cutting through this part. I'm not cutting all the way to my seam. I'm just cutting just almost close to my seam, not across, as you can see. So what I'm going to do, I'll take this over to my pressing iron and press it down nicely. But before I do that, I also notch my lining piece. Once I'm done ironing all of these in place, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to be placing them right sides facing each other like this, and I'm going to be sewing along this neckline with about 1/2 inch, and then I'll be turning the lining inwards to give the neckline a clean finishing. Also, at the sides here, I'm going to be joining both the lining and the main fabric with 1/2 inch on both sides, just to conceal the rough edges. Also, for the back pieces, I'm going to be placing right sides facing each other. This is the right side of my back piece. I'm going to place right side of my lining facing it, and I'm going to be sewing along the neckline with 1/2 inch, and I'll be sewing along the zipper line with 1/2 inch, and also along the side with 1/2 inch. And I'm going to press it down and show you the outcome. For my skirt pieces, I'll first of all be indicating that this side here is my waistline so that I don't mix it up while sewing. So the part I'm drawing 2 lines indicates my waistline. Okay. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to open up my skirt pattern like this. This is the front. I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to be placing right sides facing each other like this, and I'm going to be sewing along the sides with 1/2 inch, and I'll be turning it to the right side. So I've gone ahead and I've sewn down my neckline. You can see how nicely this is finished. I went ahead to give it a nice press, and I also joined the sides and turned it in with my lining. I did the same thing for the back piece, finished up my neckline nicely, finished up the zipper and also the side. So what I'm going to do to attach the front and back together, what I'm going to do, I'm going to place it right sides facing each other, and I'm going to be aligning them along the shoulder line. So to join it, I'll first of all open up my front piece like this, and also open up my back piece. I'm opening them up along the shoulder line. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to be aligning the shoulder lines together, both the front and back. I'm going to be aligning them together, and I'm going to sew with 1/2 inch along this lining side and also along the main fabric side. So I'll just align them like this and sew with 1/2 inch seam allowance all through from one end to the other. I'm going to do the same thing for the other shoulder. And then for the side, initially we left 2 inches for our sewing allowance, and we have used 1/2 inch to turn in our lining. So what we have left here is 1.5 inch. So that is what I'll be using to sew the sides, 1.5 inch. And don't forget that for the back piece here, we are going to be adding a dart to this point. So I'll take this over to my machine, and I'm going to stitch down everything I just showed you. Going over to the down part of my gown, which is the skirt part, I went ahead to sew down the sides, and I turned them neatly with the lining. This is the zipper area. I also finished it nicely with the lining. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to open up my front piece. This is my front piece, and I'm going to be aligning them right sides facing each other, just like what I have done for the up. And after doing that, I'm going to be sewing down the sides with 1.5 inch allowance we left. And also don't forget that on the waistline we are meant to put in that there, so we're going to be adding that accordingly to the front and also to the back. So I'm going to take this over to my machine and join all the pieces together and then show you what it looks like. I've gone ahead and I've joined the shoulders. You can see that there's no seam poking out anywhere. That's the aim of what I was doing there. This is the outcome. So I also went ahead and I joined the side with 1.5 inch sewing allowance. You can see this is what the inside of the top looks like, neatly finished and neatly turned. So for the skirt piece, I also went and I sewed the side with 1.5 inch from the waist all around to the hem. I also inserted my darts on both the front and the back. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to bring over the top part of my dress and I'm going to be joining both the up and the down together. And right here, I'm just making sure to align both darts. Make sure that they are aligned so that your work can look appealing after sewing. So this is how I'm going to be joining it basically. Darts aligned, sides aligned, and everything aligned. So how I'm going to place this, I'll be placing right sides facing each other. I'll take this over to my machine and I'll sew from the one zipper end to the other. I've gone ahead and I've done just that. You can see that our darts are aligned, our ties are aligned, and everything is finished up neatly. I went ahead to weave it down neatly so that the inside can look presentable. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to hold this up. You know, we're fixing zipper at this point here. I'm going to hold together the zipper allowance we had left. You know, initially we left 2 inches and we have used 1/2 inch to turn in our lining. So what I'm going to do is this. From this waistline, I'm going to measure down 8 inches. That is our hip point there. And from this 8-inch point, I'm going to be pinning down all the way to the hem. The reason for that is because I'm going to be sewing from this point here all the way to the hem, but then I'll be leaving this up part open because that is where I'll be fixing a zipper. And the remaining allowance we have is 1.5 inch. That is what I'm going to use to stitch down this part. Well, by the time I get to the hem, I'm going to take in 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to draw it out to illustrate how I'm going to sew this. Our allowance left here is 1.5 inch. I'm going to mark that here, and then on the hemline, instead of marking 1.5 inch, I'm going to increase that to 2 inches so that it can have a nice shape at the back of our dress. So I'm just going to draw a straight line like this, and this is what I'm going to be stitching by from here all the way down. After I'm done doing that, I'm going to be fixing my zipper from the neckline all the way to this point, which we will be sewing down.